Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm John Sparano at the SDSA, and today I'm really pleased and excited to talk to production designer Mark Scruton and set decorator, also SDSA, David Morison, about their amazing and imaginative work on the hit film Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Welcome, guys. So nice to have you guys here today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
I guess I can't say the title one more time. I'm sure you guys are sick of that joke on the set.
It is a bit of a tongue twister when you have to say it a lot. Yes, we've been.
But all right, well, let's start from the beginning. I guess with any Tim Burton film, I guess you got to start with Tim Burton. Now, I know you guys have worked with him before, which is great. And like I said, I binge watched Wednesday when I was doing a Netflix show in Atlanta. I think I was more excited to watch Wednesday than I was to actually decorate what I was supposed to be doing because I was really involved. That was great. But, Tim Burton, one of those names like, Wes Anderson, when you say the name, you're already thinking about production design. So I know you guys worked before, but what was different about coming back to Beetlejuice? Was there a strategy? Was there, I know, Mark, I guess this is more of a question for you when you started.
Unlike Wednesday, which was new territory for all of us, Tim hadn't done TV and it was new world for him in terms of building that Addams Family vibe up and everything else. I think Beetlejuice was quite a big deal for him in terms of revisiting it. And obviously he'd been trying to do it for a long time and it hadn't really happened. And suddenly it was happening. And then the reality of that for him was a big deal, but obviously for me as well. I'd got wind that the script was sort of floating around when we were doing Wednesday, but you sort of very patiently wait until someone asks you if you're going to be involved in it or not. So when they actually did it, it was fantastic. It was exactly what I've been dreaming about. But then the reality is, now I've actually got to do this, and it's something that there's a huge weight of responsibility sitting on your shoulders. Wednesday was kind of nice because nobody really expected anything from it, and then it was a surprise hit, and that wasn't that nice, and we sort of done it under the radar. But then there was no escaping the fact that Beetlejuice had been promising a sequel for 30 plus years, and suddenly it was happening and we had to do it all, which was noticeable in Tim's approach as well. He was much more reticent about diving into the design work. Wednesday we just got down to it, and I think it took a while for him to realize that we would, this was happening and we had to get on with it. And again, I think from my point of view, I had to just sort of put the weight of expectation behind me and get on with it. But it was a while before we actually sat down and around his kitchen table and discussed what the show was actually going to be and what the film meant to him, and then how we were going to approach it, and whether this was something different or whether, I think I'd gone into it with the opinion that it was meant to be the same film, just a continuation. I mean, all the things that were good about the first film, we had to keep, we weren't, a lot of remakes and reboots, so take all the bits that made them special and get rid of them.
Right. Well, what I really loved, I think, on a general level on production design and the set to decoration, was that you guys got into that world, but I think you kept like a lot of the things grounded. Like I think a lot of times, you go into a fantasy thing and everybody's going to go crazy. I guess I'll just bring up a set right now, the boiler room, Beetlejuice's office. Now that one really, really stuck out for me because I did used to work in one of those offices back then. And I was lucky enough to see this on the big screen. So of course I'm looking at everything you guys are doing. And I saw a motivational phrase on one wall. It was accurate to what that is, what the environment is, but also amazingly accurate to the world of Beetlejuice. So David, I love the approach of having the old steel case desks in and all that.
Yes,
there was a twist. So if you could tell me a little about that one.
Well, we had to make, we needed 16 of those, which of course in the UK are very hard to get hold of. I'm not sure there are 16 left. So we had to sort of make them. And also they needed to be stacked up
Yeah.
At the end of the film when he's barricading the door. So there was so we knew they had to be quite lightweight and safe in that respect. And so I found one that we liked, that we bought, and we brought it in, and the very clever, prop makers copied another 11. I think we had 12 altogether. Beetlejuice had a slightly bigger one. They were able to make one that where the kind of drawers opened.
Right.
Well, there it is. Yeah, no, that was a good fun set to do that one. I liked it. I like the scale of it.
Yeah, and Mark, I love that it's set up the way they're set up. The enhancements you had in the, put him up on that extra level, and then the windows. I mean, it's like it felt like a boiler room, but really had all this style that I think really helped so much in creating it. Tell me a little bit about all that goes, and I mean, what was your like visual metaphor for that?
We had a set of rules that were sort of set up by the first film. We knew, there were certain things you had to try and maintain to keep the look stylistically. But in every set, we then tried to make it, have its own little internal theme. So this was sort of Glenn Ross meets,
yeah,
sort of a surrealist sort of nightmare, meets a little bit of Art Deco, meets, it was that sort of world. And I took the boiler room metaphor a little bit literally. So we had all the pipe work and wanted to, double meaning to that whole thing. But it was one of the first sets I did. I think this was my finger in the wind to see whether I was going to get it right for Tim. I think this one and the dry cleaners were my first two hits going in saying, is this what you want?
Well, and both of those sets, being sort of business functional sets that also had to be creepy and in the afterlife. I loved all the detail. I loved David. I loved all your little, the world's best boss cup, and it's like all those things.
Good, yeah, no, great. We were quite lucky. There's a prop house I know in the Midlands has a lot of that 1960s Americana stuff, and so I went up there, raided it one day and came back with some really, really good stuff and some goodies. And also we also managed to kind of purchase quite a lot as well, because we knew there was going to be an explosion.
Right.
And obviously didn't know how much damage that might cause and whether we need to make soft, telephones that are going to fly through the air or what have you. I ended up buying quite a lot as well off the internet, which was a great asset these days. I'm finding in the digital age, buying stuff is so much easier now.
Oh yeah, and in the original Beetlejuice, I don't believe we had the internet, so very, very different. But I loved how all that was in the dry cleaner. Also, another one with so many great details. I mean, like I said, I'm so glad. I think this is the first film I've seen in a theater in like 3, 4, maybe more years, and it was like so great to see it there, because
it certainly holds up to seeing the detail in it. I think, there you go. There you are.
Well, there's me.
Oh, there you are.
That shows the scale of it. I mean, I don't think you ever got a shot that showed the full volume, but that track was sort of like a roller coaster that just went round and round and round and round and round, which is just hours of fun in itself. And your team, David, had great fun with all the costumes, because they all, not that you ever noticed it, but all the costumes are meant to be people that have died. So they were all, military uniforms with holes in them, or, period outfits with the heads missing, or.
That's right. Yeah. It's a shame you never saw. We did a back room of this set that I don't think it ever kind of got seen with sort of those, those press, press irons they used to have and stuff like that. It was that's the big sadness for all these jobs. You do these sets and you hope that they'll get seen to their best. It was good fun, that one.
It was an original plot point, wasn't it? There was a whole scene where Dolores made her dress. She had a sewing machine and she was meant to
sort of make a dress from all sorts of different bits of fabric that she pulled off the shelves. But I think it slowed the whole sequence down, I think, in the end. So they just went straight to the fact that she pulls an amazing dress off and touches it down to this black sort of goth extravaganza that Colleen came up with. But I mean, I think this photo and all the photos kind of show what you were saying about at the beginning about it being grounded and not sort of flying off into wild sort of CG worlds. It was, that was kind of critical. I think that's something that Tim's really keen on as well, is that the world's, you're in a physical environment. You're not playing blue screens and I mean, obviously there's moments and you have to do those things and you push it here and there, but most of the time we're in what you're seeing on the screen is what was really there.
Yeah, and what I also loved is all the actual, live effects. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the other thing, which I guess makes both of your jobs a lot harder. That we don't just do, oh, we'll just zip over to CGI and have, all these things happening. But I could obviously see, this was kind of an old school, effect with things opening and things exploding and all that stuff. So, I mean, how much time did all that add to your, I guess your the whole production? I mean, because I know those kind of things will take a lot to put together.
The whole job was actually quite fast.
I mean, for a film of this scale, we had like 12 weeks prep and a 9-week shoot, which was nothing for a tentpole movie like this.
Yes, no, it is.
But it kept it. I think it kept it alive. I think it stopped it becoming something else.
Right.
And I think Tim likes that. It had a pace to it. And there's a problem it needs solving. Right, we're going to do this. This is a physical thing. We need a bit of fishing wire and a bit of gaffer tape, and we'll cut a hole in it. And there you go. Boom, we've solved the problem. And I think that gave it an energy which he wanted. I think because I think obviously that's how the first film was made. It was
Yeah.
very much in the spirit of that. And I think if it had become a 6-month shoot and multiple units working, it would have been a very different type of film. So
Right. You did get the feeling that it was a very tight cast and a very tight, all the people working on it, it was very, you could kind of feel that when you watched it. Let's go to the house. Now, here you have a thing you're recreating. And I saw a lot of the pictures of it being built. I mean, that was pretty amazing. And I have to say, I'm, I couldn't stop looking at the fabric over the house. And I was like, okay, that's a lot of fabric, so.
great idea on paper, the fabric, and it was perfect because we'd struggled so hard to find a hook for the house. It was so brilliant in the first film where it had gone from the cozy country, colonial thing to the sort of postmodern
Right.
craziness, and it was like, well, where do you take it from there? How do you take that one step forward, and project it 30 years and what's happened to it, and it took a while for us to get back to the fact that it was as it was. We were going to take it back to the bare bones of the first film and convince ourselves that Delia had got into sort of historical restorations, and which was obviously a fad for a while, and she'd gone full tilt on this and restored it back to its former glory. But then what do you do with it next? And that was where the fabric came from.
No, the fabric's great. And then when you go inside and it has all the, classic sort of modern contemporary furniture all in it. I mean, I remember there's a shot right at the beginning where they're doing the Grief Collective, and Catherine O'Hara is talking to the camera, and I'm like staring at the couch behind her. And I'm going, okay, I know where that one's from. It was like a little bit of I mean, David, I guess you could call it on this. It was a little bit of a classroom in, mid-century or
Absolutely.
modern.
Well, we wanted it to be obviously, modern and expensive looking, and reasonably not pretentious, but we wanted, she's a
little bit pretentious.
Yeah.
A little. But Mark found a furniture company in New York called Apparatus, who were very helpful to us, loaning us some of their furniture, some of the light fittings. Not that sofa, but yeah. So that sofa, that armchair behind, that's Apparatus, and I think that gave it a look. Yeah, it was those lights are from them as well. I think it was.
Yeah, and it was trying to mix, because if you hold on this one a minute, the architecture and the joinery and all the wainscoting and everything, that is back to the original version of the film, but then they've given it this sort of color wash, and we wanted to get that mix back of the original house and then contemporary furniture, but it's slightly more mature, but kind of not really. It's like Delia's sort of grown up, but kind of.
Exactly. But I mean, and I love seeing through the windows at the fabric too. I mean, that was like really gave it like a whole another level. But no,
we wanted it to look expensive as well.
Yeah, it certainly did. I mean, we've all made money at this point. That's
exactly. Yes.
I mean, when you open up, and
she's been successful. Yeah, for sure.
Successful, and that's the thing. There's like she's famous now. Lydia's famous. And I love the opening talk show also. That's like, a little more of my background. I love the star drop, and I loved all of it. I mean, that really looked fantastic.
That was fun, actually, the talk show, wasn't it? I mean, it was clever because, well, I say it was clever. I mean, we would, self-promotion, but in the end, that was the same there was the attic set. We just had the whole attic set on wheels.
Oh, okay.
We took half of it away and made it look like a sort of doll's house that had been opened up with the turret on the outside. Brought in the audience seating and the star cloth and everything else. And then when we'd shot all that out, and actually the toilet and the corridor and everything was all sort of composite, wrapped around the Dietz house interior. That was sort of tucked away behind the star curtains. That's why the star curtains were there to sort of hide that. And then when we shot that out, it all was quickly struck, and then the whole set was wheeled around, and the other side was brought back in, and then it became the real Dietz attic. So it was a nice little trick to
yeah, it was
be cost effective, but also, you know, it was a nice nod to the set piece.
Yeah,
and it also saved us time.
Yes, which was not our friend on this one.
No.
Yeah, and let's just going back to another existing set. I mean, we talked about the attic, which is a beautiful set and looked beautiful. Your recreation was beautiful. We're looking at it. It's like, again, a challenge to make it look a little different, but, you know, just really hit it, because that's where most of the first film lived, right in there. But I thought that was wonderful. And also the waiting room, you know, it's like, I think when the audience saw all those callbacks, I think that was very big for me, because you kind of see it and you go, oh yeah, that was such a great thing, you know. And I really love what you did with all that.
We couldn't get those wrong, you know. That was the thing. We knew that it was going to be studied, and, you know, and as we're doing now, you know, freeze framing it and picking over the details. And, you know, I put a lot of pressure on you, David, didn't I, to get it right with the dressing?
Well, I mean, we had no kind of measurements for any of the furniture, so we were having to guess how big all the light fittings. We made most of the furniture you can see there, but scale wise, we had to sort of guess it. So I'd be looking at a photograph, you know, a still from the first film of a guy half eaten by a shark, and measuring the light next to him by the measurement from his shoulder to his elbow, and sort of measuring my own and saying, well, he's about the same size as me. And I thought when they were all built, I thought they're too big, but when we put them on the set, they seemed to not be too big. I guess America used to have giant lighting.
I recently did a show where we recreated and from something from the 50s, and yeah, every lamp was like gigantic.
Yeah, I was really surprised, but yeah, you know, it seemed to. Yeah, hopefully we got it reasonably accurate. I mean, it was you know, a lot of guesswork, but they were very clever people. You know,
there's a lot of analysis, wasn't it? A lot of studying pictures, you and I, and
yes,
you know, how, you know, measuring stuff. I think some of the things got remade a couple of times because they turned up and they didn't feel right when they arrived. But I mean, the problem was that most of this stuff would, you know, in the first film, had probably come from a local thrift shop or an antique store, and we hadn't. I mean, I thought about it, but when we know, the reality is, when you're looking at this stuff, like everything, you're never going to find replicas of it. You know, it was all sort of cheap. I'm not going to say cheap tap, but it was all lovingly picked, but they was clearly what it was. And then we are spending a fortune replicating it all.
Exactly.
And also there was so much kind of green light in that set. It was hard to get an accurate color. We were getting a lot of that.
Now let's go to the whole passport, airport, you know, situation.
It's hardly in the film. It's in for about 6 minutes, I think, in the film. This scene.
But I mean, I thought that was incredible. I mean, there you were. We're looking at it there. I mean, just what you would think the afterlife twisted immigration set would look like. Tell me about that. What you were kind of visually working off of.
It was a sort of mixture. I mean, I know Tim has a real thing about airport queues. It's a recurring theme. So he was very keen. He wanted this huge snake of people, and he wanted this sort of slightly dehumanizing space. And we knew, you know, most of the sets are quite, you know, small, and as I was saying, they're all contained, and what you see is what you get. And this is the one set that we decided we had to go bigger. So as you can see, there's a blue trim on the top, but that's basically because you ran out of studio space. So the ceiling of the studio is right up there, and we knew we wanted it almost like a sort of crack through the underworld, so that you felt this sort of rock surface coming in on one side, and then this huge wall of filing cabinets. And this was our moment just to take a bit of a bigger breath and expand the world just that bit. But it's, you know, ironically only for about a few minutes. But it was meant to be a sort of mixture of, you know, sort of Terry Gilliam and Ken Adam and I'd been studying a lot of expressionist movie, and obviously Caligari was the big influence for the first film, and I sort of dug into that. And there was this great Russian film called Alita, Queen of Mars, which was a very similar sort of aesthetic, and it had a lot of riffs, so a lot of the beams and the
abstract shapes in this set definitely came from that one.
Yeah, you start getting into it starts to feel a little like Brazil. And
there's a bit of that, yeah, and a bit of that sort of German sort of
the
19.
filing cabinets.
Yeah.
Yes. And and of course, as a decorator, we put stuff on set, I'm staring at all those stanchions and I'm like, God, how'd you get those all so straight? I mean, it's just
all construction. Yeah, I mean, we from memory, I think we had to make every single handle on the filing cabinets, but the prop guys managed to make it so the handle and the sort of card holder part was all sort of one element, so they could sort of just attach one item at a for both, which saved them a lot of time, because again we were really up against it time wise, and as Mark was saying, he was keen to sort of fill the space and do as much of it in camera as we could. So there's a few hundred of those drawer fronts, I seem to remember. We
saved time with the molding of the handles, didn't we? But then we made sure that every drawer had a handwritten label inside the part.
Yeah, you have to do
absolutely.
That.
It was a joy to do that one. It was fabulous. And again, there were so many details that I'm not sure were seen. The skeleton sitting on the chair that goes up and down. That sort of thing. All the sort of dressing. I think we dressed every window, but we didn't know which ones they were going to favour until the day. We moved things around a bit on the day, I remember, but generally speaking, we were erring on the side of caution and dressing as much of it as we could, without knowing the full extent.
Yeah, well, I always find that really,
as always,
the fun, as always, but I really find that the fun part, when you're just like, okay, if I'm this guy here, who am I this guy? And what am I? And then each one, you can dress. So I mean, it's very satisfying for the decorator and satisfying for your guys, also that they can actually have a little fun in there and do things. And
I think everyone had fun. I think that's the key word. I think everyone was really enjoying themselves, and that was hopefully it shows. Yeah, it was a labor of love from all of us.
It was great fun, wasn't it? I mean, it's one of those things. I think that there was a level of, certainly on me anyway, there was a level of stress just because, Tim, he's involved, but then he quite often he steps onto the sets when they're nearing completion. So you kind of, there's always that. And we were doing maybe 1-2 sets, 3 a week. It's really quick, wasn't it? It was maybe even 2 a day sometimes, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, certainly.
So you're never allowed to relax.
1 a day, yeah.
Yeah, and so that once that's gone now, in hindsight, you look back, it was huge amounts of fun.
You can
most definitely.
The other thing I liked about this film was that some of the sets were unexpected, or some of the things in it were wonderfully unexpected. Like I did not expect Soul Train, and that was
nobody expected that.
That was my favorite scene. I mean, really. So, and I saw the behind the scenes of that build. This must have been quite something. So, I mean, Mark, you can kind of start on,
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of these ones where it was one of our bigger sets and actually probably had the less screen time than a lot of the other sets did. And I think, when I first started drawing it and everyone was like, really? But it's only, half a page, or it's this, I was like, well, if you're going to do it, you really need to do it. And we knew there was a New York subway train in the country, so we requisitioned that. And got it on site, and then we designed, I turned the whole front, so that whole front you can see there in that image is, hand poly sculpted into the sort of more skull-like face that I try and get. It's a hard mix because you're trying to figure out what, as with all these sets, like I said, that we try to give each one a theme and apply our rules to it. So we'd looked at the New York subway system and the London subway system, and I think Stockholm, and had some great nods that we'd sort of taken and sort of screwed all up in a big ball and tried to find our way through it. But it's not an easy one to get a handle on, because at the end of the day, it's got to have a platform, it's got to have the train, it's got to have all the elements, it's got to fit in a certain part of the stage, because we only had 4 stages, so everything had to fit around each other. It was like a big Jenga puzzle trying to get it to fit.
Right, and then you had to turn it into a big disco party.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, believe it or not, that got pared back a bit. There were, as you can see, there were disco balls at, one. We had these mirror balls that were going to drop down. Getting the departure sign was a challenge. We really tried to get a flick, like a real flicker one. But we found one actually, but it wasn't. It was one we knew that it had to say the Fields of Elysium, and the flicker board. that we had didn't have enough letters. It was one letter short to say the film was missing. So we ended up, sadly, we had to give up on it, and it was actually too small anyway. It was once it's up in the air, it needed to be a 8-foot wide item, and so we ended up using a TV screen, and they comped it on, which was a disappointment because I really wanted it to be the real thing. And
you couldn't tell though. Tim couldn't tell actually. He came on and thought we'd done it for real because it was a monitor with a graphic that did the flick.
Right.
Yeah.
And when it was up in the air, you couldn't tell. I thought it was going to look awful, but it actually looked brilliant when it was up there. But then Tim, of course, came on and said, "I want to do a shot from behind it. Can you double side it?"
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh,
yes.
really? Okay.
But yeah,
which we did, didn't we? I remember we did. Yeah,
we did double side it. Yeah, overnight.
Yeah. That was I thought that set was a lot of fun. It was quite, the floors were sloping. It was, hard work for the dancers, I guess, and the dressers, but great fun for us.
But yeah, it might not have been on screen that long, but there was so much coverage of it. I mean, and especially, when you work with dancers, then you're into all this other stuff. But,
well, I wasn't popular with them at all. Not one single step was level or straight or had the same going on it or anything, which was great for our aesthetic. And it had to be like that. But then the dancers trying to rehearse on it, I made myself squares on that.
In their big platforms.
Yes.
But you see those light fittings, the two cone-shaped light fittings that are hanging up. That was a fantastic find. When the mirror balls got elbowed, it took a while to find some good station, runs of sort of lights that might work in a afterlife railway station. And I think they were East European, and we managed to get about 12 of them, and I think they're fabulous.
They were gorgeous.
And I love that little brick detail you have going around that. Framing it was really, really nice. I didn't notice that till right now.
And you can see, if you look at the tiles on the back wall, you can see not one of those tiles is regular. They're all wibbly wobbly, wonky. And that was, as much as that, we could try and get into it. But it's interesting, just with Tim, you can't just go mad with it. You can't just draw everything wonky and wobbly because that doesn't work. And we found this on Wednesday as well, didn't we, David? He's quite particular about his wonkiness.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but you can see that because it's part of his thing. I mean, it's one of the few directors where you see something and he's done it already. Like Jeremy, when he's with Astrid in the treehouse, as soon as you see that tree, that's a Tim Burton tree.
Yes.
I mean, without a doubt. There isn't too many directors where you're just like, I know exactly what that is. Yeah, when you see the wide of this, that's a Tim Burton tree. It just is.
Tim Burton tree. And every time I read the scripts and it's like, oh, then it's sitting in a tree house, you're like, oh, right, okay, we've got to do a tree again.
You're right. Okay, so while we're here, this is another one unexpectedly, fantastic. Astrid's ride here. I mean, I loved, where you shot this. This was some place. What was the name of the town you shot this in
Melrose, which is just outside of Boston.
For this
particular scene, yeah. So we split. The fictional town of Winter River was primarily East Corinth, but in the script, it's grown into a bigger town. 30 years later, it had expanded and become a bit sort of gentrified, and obviously, actually, Winter River hadn't changed at all. It was exactly the same. In fact, it got a bit smaller and a bit, more downbeat than it was before. So we had to find this sort of additional suburb, and I spent a long time driving around sort of Massachusetts and Vermont trying to find somewhere that you could convincingly pair with East Corinth to try and give it a bit more scale. And we found another district, and it had to have the geography, coming back to what we're saying about Tim always wanting, real environments, and the geography has to fit. So you can't really cheat it. So it had to have the T-junction, the slope down, the jump into the garden, that all kind of had to flow properly. So you had to find that geography and that layout, which I'd found, and then we thought we were moving ahead. Tim had been to see it and approved it, and then rather unusually, the various people in the neighborhood had issues with the show and thought we were sort of supporting devil worship or whatever else, and suddenly we weren't really welcome, which was a shame. And I think actually, I had to rescout it because you just couldn't take the risk that we were going to have problems moving forward. So I did rescout it. Unfortunately, I think the people then changed their mind, but it was kind of too late then, and we'd moved on. But actually, then I found this place, Melrose, which was infinitely better than the previous location, and it was just so perfect and had
enough space for us to build the tree, because obviously we had to build that in their back garden, and and it all clicked into place, which was very fortuitous, I think, for us.
But I loved her ride through. You're riding through past all these amazing, quaint little Halloween decorated houses, and it's this, very classic fall, and then all of a sudden you just have one of the most harrowing bike rides I've ever seen. I'm like, oh my God, is Asher gonna die here right now? Like, is that where we're going? And then smashing into that tree at the end. But
a dramatic accident, wasn't it?
Well, so one thing that I don't think I've mentioned this before and anything else. So the thunk you hear when Astrid hits the tree, that was the real sound of the stunt woman hitting the tree.
Oh my God!
It sounded horrific. Everybody on the shoot was like when she hit that tree, and then she just bounced up and was like, thumbs up, and we're like, oh my God! Sounded
that was a pretty good
horrifying.
She earned her money.
Yeah, she definitely earned her money that day. It was all on camera. It was amazing.
But yeah, another great, just the, as you're saying, environment wise, incredible. And then I did not expect, cars and trucks and this, and then she
Astrid, yeah.
Astrid, that was a really nice, sequence. I really appreciated seeing Jeremy's bedroom too. We haven't
all David, that room.
There's a lot of me in that room. I had a room like that when I was his age.
Yeah, it's like all the stickers, all the stickers, all the band posters, all the taking something and changing it. You had a lot of games in that room.
Yeah.
And the thing that I thought was very, very funny was taking the Monopoly money and putting it up.
Oh, you noticed that? Oh,
yes, I did.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah. Well, it's a sort of. I've lived in shared houses with people. It's the sort of stuff you do when you're a student, isn't it? Yeah, I guess.
You have a guy that's I guess he's not. He's still in there he was 23 many years ago, and brain is still a kid brain, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I'm much older, and I've still got that same brain. You can see behind me, I'm sort of into records, and so it was very much his room reminds me very much of one I lived in when I was a bit older than him. Slightly bigger than my room, but similar ideas.
He says, "I found all this stuff in the attic. I didn't even know we had this stuff."
Yeah.
He comes in for the party. I'm like, "Wow, you redecorated."
Yeah.
Now let's go over to the church and the mausoleum and all that. Now, the thing I loved is that the church was simple. I think the tendency would be let's do some Gothic. I know in the town it would probably be a simple church, but I loved that design. And now, was that built from scratch, or was that on a location?
No, it was all outside and in. Yeah, that's the concept. That valley was a location just outside of London, and then we put all the tombstones, the mausoleum, the church. It was all built in situ. It was great. It was trickier than I thought to find that location, because you wanted somewhere that was quite self-contained. Actually, a lot of rolling hillsides, when you go out there, they're quite vast, and you can see the real world. And this was actually quite a small little basin that we built it in. So it was always hills and trees, whichever way you look, which suited us nicely because we were nice and secluded and private. And
I guess getting the whole scale of that church, knowing how the final scene was going to involve a lot of, there was a lot of effects in there and a lot of stunts. And you're in a big church at this point. I thought the scale was perfect because it feels exactly the same on the outside as the inside, your interior set. There was so much of this.
We interesting enough that I designed this set, and you're right, I tried deliberately to keep it very simple. I wanted it to be a contrast, to the underworld and everything else. The afterlife was this sort of vibrant chaos, and I wanted this to be as clean cut and as simple and as monochrome. We just had this one single red stripe, which was echoing everything else. We've always got these red pops all the way through it. So everything in the real world is sort of quite monochrome and pared back, and then just flashes of red here and there. So that's what the carpet was about. But it wasn't as big a sequence when we first designed it, and we were already building it when suddenly Tim sort of went full tilt, with suddenly it's like, oh, there's a cake and there's a thing, and we're like, oh, right, good. It wasn't quite what we were planning on for this set, but okay. But he's very good, and I think this comes back to what we were saying about having a short schedule, and when he showed me all the script pages and he talked us through, he got us all on a Zoom call and he talked us through the MacArthur Park sequence, which hadn't been fully developed by that point. And he sort of talked us through it. And I afterwards I went and got him and said, look, come and look at the set, because I don't know if it's big enough.
Right.
Let's go and look. And he walked on, and I was sort of marginally horrified that he was going to say, no, this isn't going to work at all. But he wasn't. He was like, no, this is great, and this is going to work, and we can do this. And I think other directors may well have gone, I need, now I know what I want. It needs to be bigger. But he didn't. He totally fitted it around the set, which I was very relieved and grateful for. But that sort of highlights the nature of how he wanted to make that show.
And David, where'd you find all that lighting? I mean, it's like
he made it. That was all made.
Really?
Mark showed me a photograph of a church that he liked in Copenhagen, and that had sort of wrought iron, hanging lights like that. So we sort of didn't copy those, but we made a version of those. And then the wall sconces, I found the two standing lights, the two floor standing candelabras were hired, and we designed the wall sconces to match the same sort of Puritan look, the simple look, with mirrors obviously to double the light. And it was luckily we had really good makers, as mentioned, and they banged those lights out quite fast.
It's just I just can't believe you guys did this on the schedule you did it on. I mean, I see all the stuff, and a lot of times you assume that had to be made, but
everything. I mean, everything was made, wasn't it? And I think actually looking in that image, even the church organ, everything was built in there.
Oh, the organ pipes, absolutely, they were all made, I think.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the cake was our biggest nemesis on that show, because on this particular the MacArthur Park sequence, one of the big points was Willem Dafoe comes through the window and goes headfirst into the cake.
Right.
So we had to do multiple repeats on it, and it needed to be cake because it needed to explode like a cake and everything else. And we built how many? 6 of those, David?
At least. Yeah.
And there was a number.
There was a lot.
I think it was 6, and they were real cake, because in the end it was like, well, it may as well be real cake, because what else is it going to be? I think half of them were fake, and then the other half were layered. Where of course they've got to maintain their own strength. There was all sorts of internal structure, but then the whole sequence got. We were literally in the morning we were shooting it. One of the actors was taken ill.
Oh,
so the whole sequence got punted down the schedule by a couple of weeks, which was fine.
Wasn't it? That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we were ready. Everyone was ready, so we're fine. And then we came back to it. And not being bakers and home economists ourselves, no one had really twigged that in a week or whatever it was, sponge cake sort of turns to concrete. So when William Dafoe came through the window, he sort of slammed into a brick wall, which was rather embarrassing for all of us, which we hadn't really figured on. So we all had to then jump on. I think your assistants are running down the shops buying cans of shaving foam as fast as they could.
Right,
and
I remember.
Piled it out and pumped it full of shaving foam and sort of everybody, David Balfour, the props master, we're all there trying to craft this shaving foam cake. And actually we did take 2. It was much more successful.
Wow.
Minty.
That's real effects for you right there.
And there was so little space in that place. I remember as well. There we were. That church was right next to the Soul Train, and on that one side you could almost touch it, and then on the other side was the corridor. Those cakes were living out in the public corridor during the time when between underneath the tarpaulin, so as no one could see them, because space was so much of a so hard to find.
Yeah,
because the track for the Soul Train and the track for the cake crossed over, didn't they? So
yeah.
You couldn't have the Soul Train running in that direction because the cake was going to be running that direction.
Yes.
See, now that would have been a good scene right there.
I know, right? We missed a drink.
Willem Dafoe, let's go to the Wolf Jackson office. You have this actor in hell who's completely always this character. So this again had so many good details, and I loved him practicing his lines to himself, and there are all these horrible lines from bad TV. And his assistant was amazing. I don't remember who that actress was, but that was a whole life right there. It's like you guys went into film noir land a little bit. And so let's talk about this set a little bit. Where was your inspiration on it?
Well, I mean, from initially, my brief, again, like all the sets, was to find its own little hook. And this was like 80s cop shows initially. I watched every much of which I've grown up with anyway. But that was my brief today, where it was like, it's, Beverly Hills Cop meets, all these other shows that we'd grown up on, and then you ran with it hell for leather, Dave, but you didn't smashed it on this one, I thought.
Oh, well, bless you. Yeah, no, that was the big challenge for us on this one, I think, was the Venetian blinds, because all the windows were sloping and Mark wanted all the blinds to be sort of broken. They were defying kind of gravity a lot of the time, and I wasn't sure it was going to, a lot of them are sort of wider at the bottom. We had to cut them because they're wider at the bottom than they are at the top, some of them. And obviously they've got strings. We had to move all the strings almost into the middle so as they wouldn't fall down completely, and it was a challenge. But I must pay tribute to the people that did all the artwork in that set, the graphics. Lisa Williams and her team did some great posters of Wolf Jackson. You can see they did some great posters, and I think those really helped kind of bring it together as well.
Yeah, it had you get that sort of Lethal Weapon sort of vibe.
Yes, exactly. She did a brilliant job, and yeah, again, most of that's hired. And yeah, I went to that prop house I mentioned, and I knew they had the right sort of stuff, for what Mark was after. And yeah, we had fun with that one for sure.
The desk is incredible. I'm loving it.
I knew it'd be dark in there, so the Old Spice, fantastic. So I'm so pleased he saw the Old Spice and sort of did that. That was fantastic. That really made me laugh.
Your desk dressing is always impeccable, David. I've got to say, you always it's the little details you always get on those desks. Everyone you did on the show, I thought was always fantastic.
Well, that's very sweet. I'm really glad that he noticed that as well, and obviously decided to go with it, which is great.
Yeah, no,
I mean, it was the world's best boss mug and all those sort of things as well on Beetlejuice's desk that we didn't think. Right. A lot of that stuff we thought was going to get elbowed off the set, and actually everything stayed.
Yeah, and you can really tell it's just like, it's like there's a, you got a Rolodex in there, it's like having those in
but they were also kind of improvising with a lot of things. I remember when we did the boiler room, we got one of those water coolers, one of those like a 1950s water cooler that hadn't been used in years, and then suddenly we got a phone call from David Balfour, the prop master, saying that Tim has asked, they want to use it. So we've got half an hour to make a 60-year-old water cooler work. And somehow they managed to do it. They did it a couple of times too. They did it in the break room. They also wanted the coffee machine to work as well.
It was, a lot of it was, very much defunct, wasn't it, when we got it? And we got it for the look.
Oh, completely.
Yes. And then suddenly it was like, yeah, but sure. I mean, obviously, we always have the issue of putting things on set that don't work, but shame is all those sort of antique pieces now. We're getting to that world where we, often with lights, trying to make lights work that, 60-year-old lamps that are just gorgeous, but trying to get them to have the same feel with modern fittings is really tricky these days.
No, it definitely is.
Absolutely.
I loved also the texturing of every wall in the afterlife. They all had their own sort of vibe. And I love that, like, I guess it's the interrogation scene where Defoe is interrogating Bob, and basically your classic interrogation. You have the table, chair that we've seen in every cop show, and then the light. But I loved that by doing the sort of texturing you guys did on the, or Mark, you did on the wall, it still keeps it where it is, yet refers to what you're doing what you're referring to at the same time.
Simplest set in the world, this one, but it wasn't. I mean, because it was composite and it had this two-way mirror, which was a job in itself. But in the walls, it comes back to the, the set of rules we had when we started. Bo Welch that did the original had given us the sort of set of, the walls look like this, the lighting is a bit like this, there's a green tone to it. So I think we first tried to get the waiting room texture right. And that was the plaster is, let's nail the original plaster texture, which took a long time, actually longer than I thought, to try and get that exact sort of pot marked finish that you could mass produce. Obviously little samples of something, but doing it on a wall. And it was quite complicated. They had to put a really wet mix on, and then we're throwing handfuls of sand at the wall, and we'd have to let the whole thing dry, then sandblast it all back to get all the sand out of it, and then put another squeeze over the top. So it was tricky. But then, like I said, then you have your master, and then you try and work out variations of that. So, Wolf Jackson's had a slightly different version, other places a different version, and we with the paint we try to tip the silver, so it was always a metallic finish. We started with dark graphite and then dry brushed it with the silver, but then we airbrushed over the top of that with a glaze, which was always tipped into a warmer tone or a cooler tone or whatever else, just to give them different feels. I mean, it was subtle, and sometimes you didn't really pick up on it, but it gave them a warmer feel or a colder feel, or
Right. Yeah, I really loved that because it just tied everything in so well, and then but gave you opportunities to add a little different things behind it. Also, Danny DeVito's office at the beginning, another one where you had so much detail on that warehouse scene, and great. I mean, the my favorite part about the Monica Bellucci character was just her putting herself together there. I mean, that was really amazing. But again, so I guess this is a lot of, I saw, this is a lot of decoration in that one. David, tell me about what kind of warehouse was this supposed to be?
Well, that's a very good question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. There were lots of different scale boxes. Obviously, we had to have some that would, hold a torso or hold a leg. So yeah, I don't think we ever really discussed what kind of what sort of
well, we went
house
through
it was, did we?
Yeah, we obviously it's lost and found.
There were lots
And
of numbers. Oh, we have lost and found. Yeah, of course.
and obviously the idea was it was lost and found, from the beginning of time. So like the boxes that Monica's
Oh yeah.
dismembered figure in were sort of meant to be 1300 sort of crates. And then we went right through to modern crates, and it had a whole range in between. So you wanted to feel like it had a real history in that space. So everything, there was some positively collapsing sort of medieval boxes, and there was some military crate, aluminium crates in there. And I think I wanted to, the idea was it wasn't just Monica that was dismembered in there. It was all sorts of bits and pieces. So there were jars with hands in, and sort of chandelier crates which had whole torsos suspended in. Some of the stuff didn't make it onto camera, of course, but the notion was yeah. I mean, my original idea was that it was huge. It was a vast warehouse, Raid of the Lost Ark sort of ending kind of warehouse, which again, it's kind of, when you brought it back down to human scale, we ended up using tricks at the end. So there's big mirrors at the end which reflect it deeper. So it was only half the size of what you see. And then I had your poor team, David, sourcing ever diminishing light size. So yes. the coulis shades sort of diminish off to the distance, but they're only about 3 foot, of coulis shades. But they were, Alice Phelps, one of your assistants, was coming back with sort of pot lids that were, diminishing, and it was great.
I remember.
Yeah,
yes.
I loved all this sort of like janitorial stuff that was in there. It's like Danny DeVito's like the mops and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was, but
in his cupboard, yes.
Which was great. I mean, the more unusual, the better with that sort of stuff. You found that great sort of buffer, didn't you? Which we had to build again from scratch. We found a great one, and of course we couldn't use that one, so had to copy it and make a replica and everything else that could then electrocute poor Danny DeVito across the room.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I love that everything had such life. I mean, in depth, everything had much life, I guess. But also, oh yeah, and then the other one was I also loved the wedding night scene from Michael Keaton and Monica Bellucci. Tell me a little about that set, because I think it seemed to me there was a little more to it. I didn't really see as much as I wanted to in the bedroom, and then where I guess they get married someplace too. There's like an altar. I mean, am I remembering this right?
No, you're right. It was a whole little film within a film.
Yeah.
And originally I had sort of planned this very grand backlot build, which had the plague pits and a ruined cathedral, which was all going to be sort of composite, and it was going to be, and actually, I was politely informed we didn't possibly have the time or the money to this huge backlot build, and which was actually a blessing, because again, it came down to practicalities as much as anything, which drove us, and they were all ended up being little vignettes that you really could only shoot from one angle. You're saying you maybe didn't see bits, but if the camera had tilted left or right, you would have been shooting the studio wall. They were all layered up, very theatrical. So we did painted backings and cutouts, and it was full on sort of Mario Bava sort of horror film pastiche. The sequence where pulling rings off people in the plague pit was sort of, the camera was shoehorned in between the church and the Soul Train, because you had to go right back to get the depth, because the set was there, but obviously you had to go this far back to get it all on camera, but you were between two other sets. So again, if you'd panned left and right, you'd have been seeing
the backs of the flat
Wow.
stage.
Yeah,
It
it's
was,
like I never imagined things were so tight on that film. It's just like I felt like you guys had all the space in the world and were doing everything,
the magic of cinema. But I think actually Tim enjoyed those sets more than anything. I felt like I'd put myself out on a bit of a limb because it was like, there's nowhere to go with, if he turns up and wants a shot that he can't get. And I sold it to him. I'd said this is what we're going to do, but that doesn't always translate into, 8 o'clock in the morning when everyone turns up and goes, "Where's the rest of it?" But he had the most fun on those sets, I think. In the end, he was happy as Larry shooting those, more so than some of the big exciting ones. So.
Yeah, well, that was a very good scene. And I guess there was a therapy office, right?
Yeah, the psychiatrist office. Yeah, one of my favorites, that one.
Let's talk about that one because that was a really funny scene, actually.
So the idea was obviously they're sort of shrunk down and they're inside the model. So we went and bought Doll's House furniture. There are shops that sell office furniture for dolls. So the desk is a copy of a desk that exists at sort of about 3 inches wide, and we blew it up exactly. And so if you'd seen the whole thing, all the moldings are enormous. All the scale of everything is slightly wrong. The cup and saucer's too big. The computers are sort of 1980s, 1990s, sort of like too small. We wanted to get the scale of things sort of not quite right, as if it was a doll. As we were measuring it, we realized everything was slightly wrong. So we kind of went with that. And we had, the filing cabinets, the sort of the drawer handles for the filing cabinets are sort of door knockers. So they were far too big.
It's the awards, isn't it? And every one of those certificates is exactly the same. It's all award.
Yeah.
That was very clever. I
enjoyed that set. And the sofa again was made from a doll's house. The chair that Beetlejuice sits in we extended it to be higher, so as he felt more, because Mark was very keen that you couldn't see him from when the chair was turned round. You couldn't see his hair sticking out the top, which yeah.
Sorry about that. Mm.
And I love that painting behind them. It's like such the classic sort of calm sunset therapy.
Of course, yeah.
And the big plastic plants off to the left as well, with the sort of silly, oversized leaves, which it was all. Did you ever actually see the fire, David? Had a great fire.
I don't think you ever. No, I don't think you did. Unfortunately,
just cut out bits of fabric with a fan behind it, so it was all just fluttering.
Yeah, now this I didn't get everything you're saying right now until you guys are saying it, and I'm like, okay, that's why, because it was such an unexpected. I'm like, well, what's so weird about this set? And it was like sort of a subconscious weird, I'm like, okay, but then I'm like, all right, because you see the Beetlejuice sign.
It's a dollhouse, yeah.
And then you have the amazing, baby Beetlejuice scene there, and and the actors were very good in that scene because I think Thoreau looked really scared.
He was brilliant.
Yeah,
he was really good
for a guy coming into this world that he was not a part of. I think he did a fantastic job.
Oh, me too.
And Justin fitted right in, didn't he? Actually, he was. I think he was very much at home actually.
Thank you guys for everything. It's just like incredible, remarkable work, and I think it's a testament to all the all your training, all your background, and all your just sensitivity to all this. And that's what I think was really what, like I said, the thing I got out of it was everybody working together. I got such a big sensitivity and a reverence for the film, but the fearlessness to go to another place. And I thought you guys hit that perfectly.
Right. So thanks very much. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice of you to say so.
And thank you so much for sharing taking this time out for Inside the Set, and hopefully the weather stays good on the other side of the.
Well, it's getting dark now. It's dark out. I'm facing the window, and I can barely see anything now. It's got dark since we've been talking.
It's getting dark behind you. You're getting very.
Yeah. I bet, yeah. Very nice.
Thanks so much for having it. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having it.
Thank you a lot.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.